welcome everybody. A new edition of The Last Rep. I'm here with the commish, David Bay.
You did not just do that to me.
What's up,
Thanks.
brother? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, nothing, man. Just got back from working out a little bit ago myself, so excited to get the last rep back up and running. And I would much prefer that you don't call me the commish
Ever again.
ever again, ever.
Duly noted, Your Excellency. Yeah, we'll come up with some different titles, but we'll get into the commissioning later on at some other date. That's a whole nother show. But
Yeah, let's.
I got to give some shout outs, David, because our co-host Peter McGuff, as everybody knows, the Peter the Great, he's been battling a little bit. He's been in the hospital for about the last week. He's had some issues, as most people know. Peter was battling some cancer issues last year, which we were hoping that he kind of got through. So we don't know if it's exactly that or some other things, but we want to wish him the best, of course, and give him a shout out here.
Yeah, and like a trooper, Peter's still been he's still been trying to get as much work as he can done from the hospital bed. Although literally everybody on the entire team MD is telling Peter, just worry about your health, get rested up. But he insists to get some work done. So it just speaks volumes about how important everything here at MD is to Peter. So
well, he touched base with us earlier with a group message and just to let us know, what he was doing, where he was at. And the funny thing is he was talking about his misspellings. He still writes better than us.
Yeah, that he does. Peter was on a few pain meds and not at 100% is still doing better than you and I are. So he's doing all right. He'll be, he's Peter. He's a stubborn old Brit, so I'm pretty sure he'll be good.
Oh yeah, he'll be back, and as soon as he's up to par, we'll have him on the show. Of course, I know he's really looking forward to getting the last rep going again, and then talking the business of bodybuilding. Speaking of which, our good friend Flex Wheeler also under the weather these days, also in the hospital. Any updates on Flex?
No, I haven't. I haven't really talked to Flex at all. He's kept a little bit quiet on social media, so generally to me, that's a sign that whatever he's kind of going through, he would rather keep it a little bit more private. I know Sean Ray keeps in touch with him a little bit more, and Sean's just been kind of saying, he's had some health issues that he's having addressed. So with that, just wishing him the best of luck and a speedy recovery. We hope to see him at the Arnold here in 5 weeks.
Yeah, and then speaking of the Arnold, great segue, David. The Arnold's coming up. The new season is upon us once again. 2016 coming to us. Some late breaking news literally just came out today, but apparently our good friend The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, coming up with his production company and partnering up with the Olympia LLC, of course, Robin Chang and the crew over at AMI, putting together the Olympia. New stuff from The Rock joining in.
Yeah, that's big news. I actually just saw that online today as well, and pretty much anything that The Rock has, put his hands on over the last, 10, 15 years has been gold. And obviously as an action star and an avid weightlifter, he's excited about bodybuilding. He's been at a handful of the bodybuilding shows, watching friends and family compete, and so it's anything that he does is big news. But for him to be attached to the Mr. Olympia, obviously that's going to be big time. If his production crew is doing it, it's going to be a top notch event, and I would like to assume that The Rock is going to be at the Olympia if his production company is doing it, which gives me an opportunity to stalk him a little bit further than I did at North Americans and Nationals. But yeah, it's definitely, it's cool news for bodybuilding. Anytime you get any kind of crossover between, the celebrity world and the world of bodybuilding, it's good for the sport. The fans love it. So it's definitely a good thing all around for bodybuilding and for the Olympia.
Well, I'm sensing a co-host type spot, or at least getting The Rock up on stage for a little bit in Vegas, which will be very cool. I actually knew The Rock. Now, when I lived in L.A., we were out there for about 8 years. The Rock was there. Now, he was already into the wrestling and stuff, but he hadn't done really a lot of movies yet or anything like that. He was literally just getting his foot in there. But we actually used to kick around a little bit. We used to go to some of the bars and hang out and kind of, chill out a little bit with The Rock and some of his guys. His cousin actually used to come with us. Now, his cousin is about the same size as he is. He actually does all the stunt work for The Rock.
I was going to say, isn't his cousin his stunt guy?
Yeah, that's him.
Looks almost exactly like him.
I'm standing in between these two monsters out at the beaches, bars down in Santa Monica. But we had a good time. But it's good to see. He's still got his roots. Still a cool guy. He came to the Europa last year. We got a chance to catch up a little bit. His ex-wife, who was actually his business manager now, Danny Garcia, actually got her pro card last year. She's competing in the IFBB these days. So big shout out to The Rock and Danny and that whole crew, because there's really some good people. But Dave, let's get right into it. We've got a whole bunch of changes and a new season upon us right here. Most notably, Classic Physique making its appearance. Now, we've heard a lot about it in the offseason. It was added into the NPC and the IFBB schedule, and a lot of speculation as to how it's going to look and how the guys are going to do, and the weight restriction with the height and all that stuff. We've seen the first 2 shows play out in the NPC over this last weekend. Did you see the picks?
Yeah, so the Legends Classic, I believe it was in Vegas or California.
John Lindsay's show. Yeah.
They had their first NPC Classic Physique division, and I think it was, it's like anybody was going to expect it to be. There's a little bumps in the road for the first show. You saw some guys who just look like small bodybuilders. Nothing says classic about them. But the winners in the A class, or the winner rather in the A class, and the winner in the C class, and I believe the C class guy won the overall, they look pretty good. So again, one of the things I had discussed that my concern for the Classic Physique division is when I think Classic Physique, I think structure. I think broad shoulders, a small waist, a nice sweep on the quads. And one of my concerns was that just implementing a height and a weight restriction doesn't give you classical structure. The IFBB obviously and the NPC put a lot of thought into what height and weights was gonna limit having the mass monsters and stuff. But that was a concern of mine, and that did play out a little bit. You saw some guys where you look at them and you don't think at all that that's just not a classical physique. But as we move forward with the year, and once guys start coming out more, and especially once we get on a national level show in a pro level, I think you're going to see some really good physiques, and I think the division's going to start to take form a little bit more.
Well, this will be interesting, and I came out initially, I'm not against the Classic Physique division. I didn't have any part of its input, because I have had input in some of the other divisions that we've added over the years. This one didn't come from me. But I had my reservations right off the bat, because personally, I don't know if it brings a whole lot of new clientele into the NPC and then obviously the IFBB after that. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a splitting of the brand of the board shorts, quite frankly. I think you're going to see about half the guys trade in the shorts for some smaller trunks and get on stage. And then half of them are going to discover, holy crap, I better put my board shorts back on, because it's a whole different animal when you get up there with some small trunks on. You got to show some leg. But my biggest concern was that we're not going to see classic physiques. We're going to see guys doing classic poses and all that. But I'm not so sure the physiques are classic. The physiques of Zane, Paris, Bonfato, Labrada, none of those guys, not one of them, would have fit into the height and weight restriction category that we have right now. None of them would have been in the classic physique.
Yeah, that's been a big thing that's been discussed. Like, we think about the classic bodybuilding physiques, and guys say, they just wouldn't fit. Even Sean Ray when somebody that people look at as having one of the most classical physiques of all time. But that's the thing. It's not old school bodybuilding. It's kind of a new division that's a mold between everything. And they had to come up with a height and a weight restriction somewhere. So I think this is a division where if they have the first year or first 2 years and they start looking at it and say it's not exactly what we want, you can always bump up the weight classes by 5-10 pounds or whatever. The biggest thing is that people have to remember is that this is the first year. There's going to be some things that need to be ironed out. And, as we move forward, it'll get better. I tell you what, one of the things that the guys on the boards are really discussing is the actual shorts themselves. And one of the things that's been brought up is, are those shorts bad for aesthetics? And some of the guys are talking that,
I think they are.
Hey, these shorts being square in nature are making some of these guys' physiques look a little blocky. Now, if we look at some of the pictures that are up in the forums, there's a thread in the Noble forums. There's a couple of guys that didn't use the 11-inch, essentially what looked like boxer briefs, but rather they used what looked like, 50s and 60s bodybuilding trunks.
Sure.
And to me, I actually like those a little bit better. But that, if you allow guys to just kind of use whatever they look best, that opens up the window for guys to keep using shorter and shorter trunks. And then, at what point does it end up looking like bodybuilding? So I wouldn't be against them allowing those shorts to be a little bit shorter, just to show off the quad sweep a little bit more, help with the
Sure.
V tape or the hourglass, whatever you want to call it. But again, there's going to be some changes I think that we'll end up seeing being made over the next 2 years. But for now, it was a good first show.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere. I mean, there's going to be some growing pains. I think what's going to become apparent is I don't have any problem with weight restriction. I think that's important because it keeps a certain level, in there. I'm not so sure the height is necessary because, like you said, the Sean Rays of the world. Sean had a very classical physique, in my opinion, but he wasn't anywhere close to that weight. At a whopping, I don't know, what's Sean, 5'6", 5'7"?
I'll give him 5'7".
We'll give him 5'7". I mean, I don't know what that is. I don't have it in front of me. But, I mean, he would have had to have weighed, what, like a $170 something? $180?
Yeah, I'll have to say I don't have the numbers in front of me either.
I mean, he was conservatively. I mean, Sean could have competed in the 212 as we have it today. Sean's best weight was always right about 200, 202. Now, that puts him 20-something pounds above that. If he's got to make that weight, he don't have a classic physique anymore. He doesn't have any physique anymore.
No, and again, it's classic physique. It's not necessarily old school bodybuilding. So
Right.
it's a new division. A lot of people are comparing it to some of the physiques that we saw in the in the late '60s and
Sure.
in the '70s and into the '80s. But that's not necessarily what it is. And again, I think it's something where we'll see it adjust. The height restrictions, though, you almost have to have them because otherwise, if it's just weight classes, then how do you put somebody into that class? If you just have a weight class, you could have somebody who's real short but huge,
Right.
like you do in the NPC Open Division for bodybuilding. I'll tell you what,
Then you judge him down, right? I mean, put him down in last if he doesn't belong.
Yeah, I don't. It's tricky. I think you really almost have to have height weight restrictions. What's going to be interesting, and I was just a friend of mine promotes a big show here in Wisconsin, is right now in men's physique, if you show up and you're an inch too tall or an inch too short or whatever you think you are, they just bump you into a different class. You're a
Right.
B class, now you're a C class, whatever. Men's bodybuilding, if you're trying to make middleweight at an NPC show and you roll in at 178 and you can't make weight,
Right.
you just get bumped to the light heavyweights. What's going to be interesting with men's classic physique is that if you roll in and you're 5'10 and you don't make that 200 or 205 weight class, that's it. And my understanding is now they're allowing crossovers, but if
Correct.
you prepared for men's classic physique and you don't make weight, you better have a pair of posing trunks with you because your
Right.
only other option is bodybuilding or a pair of
Men's
board
physique.
shorts and you go into men's physique. So it's the guys who are entering this classic physique division are going to have to really pay attention to what they're weighing. And the issue with that always comes up at every single show. Anybody who's ever tried to make weight at a show has been there. Are the scales in the bathroom at your house going to be on par with
Right.
whatever scale they're measuring? So there's, like I said, I think guys trying to make weight, there's going to be some bumps in the road there as well because you're going to have guys who are like, oh, I just weighed myself in the hotel room
Right.
and it says I'm 200 and I came down here and this says I'm 202 and now I can't make weight. So I
You
think
can change your weight, you can't change your height. So that's, you're kind of down to one option. Hey, listen, the bodybuilders have had to deal with that for years, so I don't have any, reservations about these guys having to
Right.
suck it up. If you got to go drop 2 pounds, then you didn't do your homework, or suck it up and come back. But at least they do have the option now, and I did agree with allowing crossovers. I mean, you can't just turn down people when they've been dieting for that long, and maybe somebody screwed up, or they just didn't get it done, or when they get. Hey, listen, even height wise. Everybody uses a different method. I mean, I've seen electronic methods. I've seen the traditional, type scale type thing where they put it on, they put a book on your head. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But even if that's off, it bumps you into a different class. So it's going to have some growing pains, but I think it'll be cool. The only thing I'm not in favor of is I'm going to have to start charging by the hour for these gigs because these are already long, man. I can't imagine that this isn't going to add another hour to a show.
No, and that's going to be a big concern. And I think what some people had mentioned today was, what about posing routines? If somebody does classic physique and they get to do a classic physique posing routine, and they cross over into men's open
Different
bodybuilding,
division.
do they get to do a posing routine for that?
Yes,
Because
you do.
right now, if somebody crosses over from bodybuilding into men's physique, for men's physique, there's no posing routine, but they still get to walk out on stage,
Sure.
do their presentation. I would hope that if somebody does classic physique and somebody does bodybuilding, whichever one goes first in the evening,
Ain't
a
gonna
lot
happen,
of
bro.
start switching it to bodybuilding. No, No, that's it.
Listen.
You get one posing routine.
It's two different divisions, man. You got
That's
listen.
it.
You
No.
pay your
No.
entry. You're paying the big buck. You're allowed your time on stage. That means a posing routine. So yes, they will pose twice because it's two different divisions. It's not like you're going in novice, in the open. That'd be different. You're still within the same division. So sorry, bro. You're gonna get stuck with me as long as I'm there at that podium.
I am. I don't know if all the guys know. I see a handful of shows throughout the course.
That's right.
So I'm up at that mic for 4, 5, 6 hours at a pop. So I don't know. We'll see.
Welcome to my pain, my brother. So speaking of posing routines, another great segue, David. Great in the segues today.
Good work.
Listen, posing has been all the talk about the last month or so. Ever since the announcement came out that posing routines will be scored, but only at the Arnolds. Now, this one kind of hits me a little near and dear because, as most people know by now, I am the IFBB Athletes rep. I work hand in hand with the Pro League, Jim Mannion, all the decision makers. And it was years ago. I'm actually the one who spearheaded. Peter will kill me for this because we argue about this all the time. As everybody knows, Peter's very old school. I love him to death. He thinks the posing routine should be scored. I was vehemently against it. I ended up winning in the court of Mannion, and we ended up taking it out. Now, I didn't want it in for the very simple reason that, A, it was never really scored. Even back in the day, there's countless examples of guys, winning Olympias and placing above other guys that were far superior posers, especially when we had better posers back then, and it didn't make a damn bit of difference when it came into the scoring. It was really just scored as another muscular round. It wasn't really a posing round per se. So I says, look, if you're not going to judge it right, then just get rid of it, which they agreed with. Well, now they're going to, Arnold kind of put his 2 cents in last year at our seminar that we did on Sunday as I was sitting with him, and he thinks posing should be in there, and he thinks that'll bring something back. I got to be honest, David, I'm not really on board with it.
I tell you what, I'm on board with the idea of having better posing routines, giving the fans more bang for their buck, getting back to guys planning and putting some effort into their posing routines instead of just picking a song and come out and winging it, which you pretty much know when that's happening.
Oh, yeah.
My main issues with the posing routines are twofold. First off, at the end of the day for me, bodybuilding is a physique competition. You're getting compared in your 8 mandatory poses. Whoever the better guy is, that's who wins. To me, that's bodybuilding. And what I would hate to have happen is for somebody to have it be close, but beat somebody in prejudging and then maybe in finals, and somehow slip a spot because the next guy's posing routine,
right.
And I have to look over the rules on how this stuff is all being judged. But basically what I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see a better physique slip down in placings because their posing isn't as good. And let's be honest, posing is, for some guys it comes very naturally. Generally people who are good dancers, could shake it a little bit when they were younger, that sort of stuff, or still can. Those guys are usually your better posers. Some guys, posing just doesn't come naturally. They have to work at it. They've got 2 left feet. But if that guy's got a better physique, then to me, that's how these shows should be judged. My other big concern is what constitutes a good posing routine. That is bodybuilding is subjective as it is. With just, apples and oranges, what kind of physiques do you like? Now you throw in judging for posing routines, and that just takes subjectivity and throws it all over the place because what the fans like is all over the place. And if the judges are any sort of representation for the fans, what they like is going to be all over the place. I mean, I know there's fans who think, and I've heard the guys, bitch and complain. There's guys who think the slower classical routines are boring as hell. They want to see
I'm one of them.
A Branch Warren, a Marcus Rule, a Mike Matarazzo get up there and hit some most muscular, stick their tongue out, shake their head. They come out to some AC/DC or, Rule when he used to come out to the Rammstein and German techno. That's what they want to see. Yeah. Some
By the
people
way,
don't like
nothing better to pose to but a song that says "You hate me" in German.
Yeah, but it was, it was badass, and that's what Rule posed. Does anybody want to see Marcus Rule or Branch Warren pose to the same music Cedric is? No.
Well, see, this brings up the whole debate in my mind. First of all, as I've said for years, it's like comparing Frank Sinatra to 50 Cent. Who does better music? It's like, well, wait a minute, you can't compare these guys. They're completely two different. Exactly. So who's a better poser, Branch Warren or Cedric McMillan? Who's better, Hidetani Yamagishi, or like I say, a guy that goes out there and just
Durham Charles. Who's better, Hideo or Durham Charles?
yeah, they're one's a very classical, very old school. Hidetani, I think, is one of the best posers of
Absolutely.
anybody out there when it comes to classical bodybuilding. But when Freddie Smalls comes out there and starts rocking the house and the place goes nuts, now, is that a better routine or is it just more entertaining? Personally, and this is why I wanted to take it out of the scoring. You want to make it, listen, everybody's bitching about the same thing. Well, the posing today sucks. Arnold said it himself, right? On that video we saw with Jim Mannion and Mr. Lorimer sitting there. Quite frankly, they just suck, Okay, well, listen, I don't disagree that a lot of them suck. However, put money on it. Here, listen, you want some good routines? Put 20 grand on it. I'll guarantee you get some damn good routines out there because these are professional bodybuilders. They're working for money. But they still know that they're not getting scored per se correctly, or again, what's correctly, David? Sean Ray never won a posing round against Dorian.
No, and you know what I think would be neat is if they've had prize money for best poser, but in the past it's always been one purse for the guy who's just the best.
Right.
And when you have like let's say you have an Arnold Classic where you have guys who like a Cedric or a Kai Green's probably going to put on some of the most entertaining posing routines. The rest of the guys might just say screw it because they know it's a one and done. Whoever wins gets the whole pot. I say if you divide the prize money as you would any other thing. Here's the first place prize money for posing, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Then you give these guys who know, hey, maybe I can't win this posing round, but maybe if I take fourth, I still walk away with a couple extra $1,000. And hey, if you're dieting for the show, you're traveling, you're doing all that, and if I can put an extra, couple hours a week into practicing my posing routine, and that's going to turn into a few grand for me that I walk away with at the end of the day, then that should be enough motivation for these guys to do something.
Well,
So
let me bring up another point there too, David. Let's just go on a limb and say that Cedric McMillan comes in here and he poses very classical. I like Cedric's posing, but very slow, but very classical, old school, and he wins the posing round as well. Does this send a message to the other guys, the Hides, not the Hides, the Freddie Smalls of the world and the Tricky Jacksons and those type of guys who that's their style, that, wait a minute now, I've got to change my style. Apparently, nobody's winning unless you're doing a classical routine. I got to be honest, bro. We're at a lot of the same shows together all throughout the year. I don't want to see 15 classic routines together. I like Durham Charles. No. I loved Melvin Anthony. I love Tricky Jackson, Freddie Smalls. I want those guys in there. I want to see that their blend and their brand of posing. I think it's great. Give 2 awards. Best classical routine, most entertaining routine. You cover all bases. Guys got a chance to make some money. And you don't convolute the scoring because you know what's coming, bro. You know what's coming, and it's going to be that somebody's going to win the show that, like you said, maybe they didn't have the best physique, but they won the posing round. That shouldn't count in there for that. Come on.
No, and that's my concern. And again, my concern is just who considers what posing to be good. I mean, there's guys who think that Kai Green is the best poser of all time. Now, personally, for me, and there's some guys that know that I haven't been a fan of some of Kai's stage get-ups and stuff like that. But if I'm just breaking down Kai's posing, I've seen his Dirty Diana routine from the Colorado Pro, I don't know, whatever, phenomenal. In 2007, phenomenal. But to me, Kai gets out a lot, and he's hitting these real quick transitions from pose to pose to pose to pose. And I don't like the way he's displaying his physique. I would like to see, I think they're good transitions, but I would like to see him slow it down a lot. He spends too much time on stage doing things that aren't posing. I don't particularly like his posing.
How do you score that?
Yeah, there's some people who think his posing is, the greatest thing ever. And I think even Arnold at the Arnold Classic last time I won it, he loved it. And I personally, in personal feelings about Kai's guest posing, get-ups aside, I don't like the technical aspects of his posing. I just don't like it. I prefer Cedric.
Here's a very real scenario that's coming up in literally 5 weeks now. It comes down to Cedric McMillan and Kai Green. Let's just say they're fairly equal in physique. Now, you're talking about, bro, you couldn't be any more diametrically different. It's literally apples and grapefruits. All right? You got completely different fruits on stage. Where do you go with this? So, I mean, you're going to go with the guy who's upside down, scaling the backdrop on the stage, or do you go with Cedric McMillan, who's more classic? You can't even score this. It's inscorable. Is that a word?
It's inscorable. No, I don't know if inscorable is a word. Considering the source of the push for this sort of type of posing round being judged, I think Cedric wins. It's coming from Arnold. Cedric is going to hit those classic poses.
Yeah, but see, Cedric ain't bringing the house down, bro. Listen, people love Kai. Like him, hate him, or anything.
The crowd, regardless of what Kai does,
sure they do. How does that influence the judges?
Crowd response, hands down. Crowd's going to go nuts for him. But the crowd, I'll tell you what. Anybody who's been at these shows, people can sit at their computers or whatever and talk about how they hate Branch Warren's posing routines. Anybody that's been at these shows knows that the crowd goes crazy for Branch's routines because they want to see like somebody who's fired up. He just displays this energy on stage, like he's aggressive. He wants to be there. He wants to kick some ass, and that comes through in his posing. You get somebody like Phil Heath who almost does like a hybrid. Phil will come out and hit a couple of classic poses, and he'll run around on stage, get the crowd into it, hit the most musculars.
That's his style.
Many variables. There's too many variables to have this be something that determines the actual outcome of the show.
Well, Branch I'm glad you brought up Branch because he's a great example of what we're talking about. How do you score him in there? Listen, he doesn't have classical routines. He also doesn't do anything even remotely close to a Freddie Smalls routine, thank God. But he's got his own style, and his style is stomping around on stage. Going back and forth and getting the people and slapping the thigh.
And the crowds go nuts over that. Just like the crowds go nuts for Rule. Marcus Rule never hit a classical pose. He never had anything planned out. He was just huge and freaky and ran around the stage and hit most musculars, and the people loved it.
Well, as the scoring goes, though, he is showing his physique to its fullest. He's showing his physique. He hits all his poses are hit and set. He doesn't move too fast through the pose. So, how do you score these routines? Which, again, just the name routine is enough to tell you, wait a minute here. His is choreographed.
You know what they should do? They should get one of the old value meters that starts in a red and goes like this. And they should have it in the backdrop.
Oh, God.
A backdrop, like an LED backdrop of a crowd noise
there
meter.
You go.
And then after everybody poses, it displays how many decibels it got up to.
All right.
And then as they're posing, you see a live scoring system. If you're going to score the posing routines, who better than to let the crowd judge it?
2 words. Challenge round. All right, moving on.
Challenge round.
Listen, we got to get to our peeps because we've been telling people we're coming back all week long. We've got some great questions, and we want to let people know as we go throughout the year with the last rep. We got our bodybuilding community out there. The MD forums are alive and well. You and I are on there pretty much nightly, responding to most of the people and some of the goofs even. But listen, they got some good questions out here, which I really like. First one that applies because the other part of Arnold's complaint last year was about the guts. And, that whole complaint at the seminar, and they look like bottles and, all that kind of... I don't know what that means, by the way, but apparently he doesn't like bottles. But the gut mandate, the mayor of bodybuilding, our buddy, right here, a staple at the MD forums, wants to know, what are they going to do about the gut mandate? Let me ask you, David, should anything be done? Is it that much of a rampant problem, or is it literally 1 or 2 guys here and there that relax your stomach?
I'm at most of the athlete meetings. Both of us are at most of the athlete meetings. And I think just about every athlete meeting after the Arnold, whoever the head judge was, did spend some time talking about stomachs. But the main talking point was focus on controlling it when you're on stage. From the second you walk out on stage to the second you walk off, whether you're sitting in the back of the stage in between call-outs, whether it's a pose down. We all saw that picture of Ruley walking across the stage with his hand in the air. He's breathing out, his stomach's hanging out. They basically just said, be very mindful the entire time you're on stage. So I don't know if the gut mandate was as much as they want different structure from these guys as much as it is, hey guys, pay attention to this. Your waistline is your waistline if you're a professional bodybuilder. It is what it is. but you have 100% control over whether you're, taking the time or being conscious of whether you keep it tight. So,
Sure.
as far as whether that actual gut mandate affected any kind of judging throughout the course of the year,
I didn't see it.
maybe it did. I tell you one guy, God, I want to say it was later on at one of the Europas that Vitaly Fatiyev, this Russian kid who's doing
Agreed. Yeah.
early 30s. I think he looked great at the Arnold earlier on in the year,
Yeah,
and then he came out later in the year, and he was at one show. Like I said,
No,
they
it
all
was the
kind of-
Europa. I think it was the Europa Dallas, if I'm not mistaken.
and he was just letting his stomach just hang. I mean, left and right. And he, when he placed lower, I mean, that could be a matter of a number of things, conditioning. But I think if it's close, I think the whole gut mandate thing, if it's close between two guys, and you got one guy on stage focusing on keeping his waist tight, when they're turning in their transitions, the setting up the side chest, that's a big one.
Sure.
Everybody likes to reach their arm out and pull back when they're setting up a side chest. And a lot of guys, when they get the arm out like that, they're taking a deep breath and that stomach hangs out. You have to be mindful of that stuff. I think if it gets close, then maybe. But, as far as a gut mandate actually affecting the scoring that we saw from show to show to show, I don't know that happened. I think it was one of those things where they wanted to, the IFBB wants to look like they're proactive. And like I said, they were talking at every single athletes meeting about how make sure you guys are doing this. So I think the bigger thing is the judges and the organization saying to the guys, hey, you have some pride in your physique when you're on stage. If you're off to the side and you're not in a particular call out, keep your waist tight. Don't let it just sit there and hang, because even when you're on the side of the stage, the camera might not be taking a picture of you, but there's going to be 100 people in the crowd with cell phones that are,
Absolutely. Another good question. Another regular contributor, George from the UK. Big shout out to George out there. He wants to know if we're witnessing the golden era of the 212.
I tell you what, I read that question and I thought about that a lot, and I guess I can answer it from two different sides. I could debate myself on it. Yes, in the fact that there's a ton of really good 212 bodybuilders. I mean, you have Flex Lewis, who's phenomenal, Jose Raymond, you have Eduardo Correa, I mean, David Henry. And the neat thing about the 212 division is even though there's this weight restriction, you have so many different kinds of physiques. You have your Hiritata, your Guy Cisternino, your Charles Dixon. I mean, so you have these guys who are, your bearded lady freaks like Jose Raymond, and you have your aesthetic physiques like Samuel Haddad, and then you have guys who are, kind of a combination of the two. And, I think the 212 division is fantastic right now. It's got a ton of talent. That being said, if we're talking about the word golden era, I bring up a hypothetical. If there was a 212 in the 80s and 90s where you had Sean Ray, Danny Padilla, Lee Labrada, I think Gaspari probably, I don't know what he was weighing when he was competing.
Yeah.
If there was a 212 back then, I think a lot of the guys would be looking at that as also being the golden era for open and 212. There were so many good small guys back then. Muhammad Makwe. I mean, the list goes on and on of good small bodybuilders that.
Bro, consider this. There was more guys that could have been eligible for the 212 than weren't back then. Most of the guys were not 225, 230,
Frank
240.
Zane, Chris Dickerson.
They were all 212 guys.
Yeah, all of them. So I think there's always been, if you're just looking at weights, there's always been very good bodybuilders that have competed under 212 pounds. It's just now we have a separate division for them. And, I think the guys that are competing today are just as good as, the old guys. It was interesting. We had, there was a meetup out at Montanari Bros in Connecticut a few weekends ago, January 14th and 15th. And this question was brought up to all the pros that were there, whether they think, the golden era guys were better than the guys now. And I believe it was Jose Raymond who, he's got a good answer for everything.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, he just said every era of every single sport thinks that their era is the best. You talk about basketball, it's like, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell were the best. Yeah. And then, Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing were the best. And now, Kobe and LeBron are the best. Every era is going to look back and say their era was the best. I think if you take guys side by side from today's day and you match them up with similar physiques from back in the day, I think the bodybuilders are every bit as good now as they have been. I might catch some heat for that, but that's that's my
Well,
two cents.
it's night and day. I mean, listen, I've been through a few decades of bodybuilding, so I've seen it literally. I started in the late '70s. I mean, I was young. I mean, I was 13, so I don't really count the '70s, but the '80s, '90s, 2000s, and up, I was competing, and I've seen a whole lot of changes. And I trained in the same. You mentioned Danny Padilha. I actually trained with Padilha up in Rochester, New York, at Samson's gym. Veritable hotbed of bodybuilding. Pete Grimkowski,
A what? A what?
hotbed,
No, no. What came before hotbed?
vertable.
A veritable hotbed.
Huh?
All
Look that
right,
one up after.
we'll go with it.
Put that in with the scoring thing that we talked about earlier. It's an inscorable, whatever it was I came up with.
Inscorable, veritable hotbed. We're gonna have a handful of terms here that people are gonna be calling you out.
Regular Julian Schmidt, I am. That one's for Peter out there. But it was a great gym. I mean, a lot of pros, a lot of future pros came out of there. But I saw Danny firsthand. Like I said, I trained with him. And I saw these guys. Listen, the guys today. And the guys today take a lot of heat, especially the last couple years, as you know, this big callback for kind of the return of the physiques of back then and all that. Look, I'm actually on stage at the Olympia and most of these pro shows. I'm actually closer to the competitors than the judges are. So I see the conditioning, the level of muscularity and conditioning is so far above anything that was out of the 80s or 90s even. It's not even comparable. That's incomparable. And I tell you this, I mean, like I say, sometimes I look at these guys and I just think, holy God, man, I mean, how do you get in that kind of conditioning, And yeah, listen, the lighting is different than it used to be in the old days. And I'm not making excuses for the guys today. Listen, there were some great physiques back then. The 90s was a very good era of bodybuilding. And anybody from the Sean Rays to the Lavronis to the Flex Wheelers, like you mentioned earlier, Matarazzo. I mean, listen, we had some damn good bodybuilders and some damn good shows back then.
Right.
Was it better at the amateur level? Yes, it was. It was better and it was a lot deeper. And we'll go into that in another show because that's a whole other topic of why that is, and we'll save that for a later date. But at the pro level, I mean, you got to give these guys. Listen, guys weren't competing in the 240s and 250s and 260s. The only guy that was that heavy back then was Ferrigno, and that's because he was 8 feet tall. And that's the only reason. The only guy. Arnold himself said what? His best conditioning was what? 230-ish?
Yeah.
I mean, that's 6'2".
Now you look at a guy at 6'2", 230 on stage, and people would complain he's too small.
He's a basketball player. Yeah, I mean, he's good. Tony Freeman used to catch shit all the time. I remember having many conversations with Tony, especially when Sean got on his ass one year and basically told him, you got to get over 300 pounds, man. You look thin. And Tony took exception to it. But I think at the end of the day, he realized that Sean was kind of right. It's like, Tony, at 6'2", plus, you better have some beef, man. You're standing next to a guy who's, look at Kai. I mean, he's what, 5'9" and 270? I mean,
260, 270, yeah.
And then you get a guy like a Big Ramy who comes along. Big Ramy is twice as big. I mean, you can't appreciate this guy until you meet him.
Oh, yeah, it's obnoxious.
He makes the big guys look small. That's how big he is. So,
yeah.
Listen, it's a different level. I'm not saying it's always better because I think sometimes, this is bodybuilding blasphemy. So, excuse me on this one, David. But, yeah, bigger isn't always better sometimes. And, the only difference I see sometimes in some of these guys is the waistline. So,
yeah. Like I said, I think every era is going to say that their era is the best, with the exception of right now. I think you look back and in bodybuilding, there's such a, the thing with bodybuilding in the golden era, it's not just the physiques of the golden era. It was the fact that, bodybuilders were kind of like rock stars. It was more accepted. Everybody had these big contracts. Flex was driving around in a Mercedes. Sean had his Lamborghinis. I mean, it was a different era altogether. So when we talk about the golden era of bodybuilding, you have to remember that discussion, I don't think, is just inclusive of the actual physiques of then as opposed to the era itself. These guys were on ESPN and NBC. I mean, Junior Nationals. Yep. Junior Nationals itself was on ESPN and NBC. We've all seen the interviews and stuff, or at least the guys who follow the old school. And now the Mr. Olympia, isn't even on TV. I mean, so, it was the era itself.
Like I say, different day and time and place. And, this is what, circling back to what we talked about with the classic and all that. I don't know if you can recreate classic. I think it's like classic music, classic cars, or anything, classic movies. I don't think you recreate them. I think classic was a time and a place and a notion. Speaking of which, segueing to our off-topic conversation, time and a place and a notion. Remind you of anything, David?
Time and I don't know. It sounds like maybe some '70s song by
Close.
England,
Come on.
England Dan or something. A
Come on,
time,
buddy.
place, and a no. I don't know.
Greece, man. Greece
Great.
is the name we were talking about here. Completely off topic, David. Nothing to do with bodybuilding, but something we always. I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of throw me.
We did want to go off topic. That was the one thing. I'm going to lose it on my off topic. Am I allowed to? Am I allowed to curse?
Mine is last night. I'm flipping channels. I catch Grease live, and I see this thing come on, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll catch it. I remember the old one, Travolta, as you and I much beloved, and long right with that Swayze crew and all that kind of stuff. Rest of his soul. So I'll catch a few minutes. Bro, this thing was unwatchable, man. I mean, the guy who plays the Travolta's part looks like a young Jim Carrey. I don't know what was going on there. I was just waiting for him to go into the pet detective mode any time now, but the whole cast is different. They got all kinds of, it was basically a rainbow coalition of Grease now that they put together. But come on, man, you don't redo Grease. You don't redo Ben-Hur. You don't redo The Terminator. Some things you don't ever redo Animal House. You might as well. Why? Can't they just leave shit alone?
No, you have some idiot in Hollywood who's looking to make money, and instead of coming up with a creative idea, they just decide to go with something that was already done. They think they're going to jazz it up a little and switch this role and that role, which rarely ever works. And I didn't watch it. You weren't going to catch me sitting home watching Grease live last night. Not a chance. I was deep into some Netflix, which is usually my go-to.
All right, what's your off topic?
Man, I'll tell you what. I saw what was probably the most boring movie of my lifetime this weekend in the theaters. So,
a new one.
The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio. Won 3 Golden Globes. This is his chance to win the Oscar. So I figure it's going to be good, right?
Sure.
Yeah, fair enough. So I'm on a date. I got movie and then a sushi dinner and then a get together at my friend's planned, right? I'm like, yeah, it's a great movie. We'll go see it. So first off, it's almost 3 hours long, which is a long time. Now, for a 3-hour movie, there's got to be something that gets your attention, keeps you into it, whatever. This movie was so slow-paced, first off, the bulk of it, that it was painful to sit through. We actually almost got up and left because we were pushing to be late for dinner, but I don't know if I've ever left the theater just because it was boring me. The problem with this movie, and the issue that I'm having, is it's so unbelievable. The producers, whoever wrote this movie, the director, basically, to enjoy this movie requires that you shut off 90% of your brain when you're watching this movie. And I'll tell you why. And if you haven't seen it,
I
guys,
haven't seen it.
Here's a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, turn it off. If you don't give a shit, you don't care, I'm going to keep going. So, it's this old frontier movie, right? And 20, 30 minutes into the movie, Leo is attacked by a bear. Now, this isn't just like a bad bear attack. He gets mauled from his ankles all the way up to his neck. And by the way, he suffers. He's bleeding all over the place. He's got gashes that are an inch wide.
Right.
Okay, mind you, these are the 1800s or whatever. And his buddies come. They don't have anything sterile. They don't do whatever. They stitch him up. Okay, now he should have bled out from this shit. So they stitch him up. And he's okay. Now, they got to carry him back through the wilderness. Mind you, they have no clean dressing. He's wearing the same dirty clothes that the bear attacked him in that are all bloody. They put a blanket over him. It would be impossible, nearly impossible to survive something like that today. And I'm not even a doctor. I'm just somebody with some common sense, okay? So first off, I'm sitting here going like, okay, this is bullshit that he survived the attack. Now he's not dealing with infections, and he's got gashes that are all the way down to the bone, which he somehow managed to live through. They're carrying him through the woods, which is stupid. Now, the other thing is, this whole thing takes place when it's snowing, freezing, wind. They're walking through frozen rivers and stuff. Nobody gets frostbite the whole freaking movie. Leo's crawling through the snow the whole time. No gloves, no hat, no nothing. I don't want to be outside snow blowing for more than 20 minutes without hat or gloves. And this guy's crawling through the snow.
And you're in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's cold here. So, the shit they, excuse my language, guys, but I have to. The shit they expect you to believe throughout the course of this movie is so unbelievable. And he survives and he ends up walking his way out. And then there's a scene where he's like in a frozen river and he's going over like waterfall and through the rapids and whatever, and he survives that
Of course.
without a scratch. And then he's in the freezing water again, and he gets out, and somehow by making a fire that's like a foot in diameter, he manages to dry off all his clothes, sleep in the freezing weather, still not get frostbite overnight. Okay, and then a half hour later in the movie, his horse runs off a goddamn cliff, like 100-foot cliff. He happens to fall in a tree and not break anything, survives like 100-foot fall, and then it's cold out, so he pulls a Bear Grylls, guts the horse, gets naked, sleeps inside the horse carcass. I'm telling you, the whole movie.
They stole that from Star Wars, man.
Yeah,
Sleeping in the carcass.
Yeah,
Come on,
Skywalker
lightsaber on that big goofy animal.
But I'm telling you, it's just, it's so unbelievable. You're sitting there going, all right, come on. Like, what is this? You know, and then, I don't know. Like I said, it would have been every bit as believable as they would have had like a magic freaking lion from Narnia come out and Leo rides the lion through the magic closet and gets back to the camp. That's how stupid this stuff is that they expect he believes. It's slow paced. I don't care if it's Tom Hardy was actually very good acting in that movie. I'll give him that. So if anybody deserves an award for that movie, it's Tom Hardy.
Give him the award.
The Bear. I'm telling you, that movie sucked. It's like I don't even care about my $20. I wanted my 3 hours back, and I wanted,
Bro,
dude.
All this adds up to one thing. Oscar time for Leo. Here it comes, bro. The worst movie he's been in. He's got no business winning it, but they looked him over on every movie out there, from Gilbert Grape to the Titanic to anything else he's been in it. He did a phenomenal job. Got passed over, and now they're going to give him for this bullshit.
Great Gatsby. The guy's done a million good movies. They're going to give him one for where he basically just gets messed up real bad by a bear and drags himself through the snow for 2 weeks.
Well, sounds like
it's bullshit.
Something I won't be watching, my friend. Thank you. Well, thank you at least for saving me the 3 hours, because I ain't going to go watch it now. And I'll wait for him to get his award and do the big speech and all that stuff. But good off topic, David. Well, that's going to bring to a close, bro, our big welcome back edition of The Last Rep. Big shout out to Peter McGuff, of course, out there. Peter, get well. We need you back on here debating the posing round. If anything gives him the strength to carry on, bro, it's going to be that. He'll come back just to debate me on the posing round.
Peter likes arguing as much as everybody else, and he's not one of these guys who's going to hide his opinion. Just one thing I want to add in, guys, we're going to have this Last Rep thread open and running on a weekly basis. Toss us the questions. We weren't able to get to everything as far as everybody's questions, but those are going to kind of roll over. We want to make sure we're getting people's questions answered. Shout outs to the guys who are putting them out there. So get out there. The more controversial, the better. I'll dive into whatever. Why screw it?
Absolutely. All right, David. Well, thanks for joining, bro. Appreciate it. We'll be back. And listen, here's the other thing. One last thing, guys. Don't look for this weekly at a certain date, a certain time, and all that. We're going to be punching these out all throughout the weeks and all that. There might be 2 shows a week, 3 shows a week, 1 show a week. Listen, as stuff comes up throughout the season, and the season's coming around in just a few weeks now, there is no lack of stuff to talk about. So we'll be on here with our opinions, of course, and we welcome yours. But yeah, get on the MD forums, guys. Get on our thread there and bring it, man. You got questions, we got answers. For David Bay, this is Bob Chick for The Last Rep, signing off.